So, the first rule of negative strategy is what? You should never lose a negative round. If you are losing a negative round, it is your fault. It means you're horrible at debating and to seriously rethink what you're doing. Because there is no excuse. Negating is so easy. You have every advantage available to you except the last speech, but you have 6 minutes to preempt that last speech, so why would you lose? It is completely unacceptable. If you are losing negative rounds, it means you have fundamentally misunderstood the activity of debate and either need to quit or seriously rethink how you approach it. Because there simply is no justifiable reason why you should be losing negative rounds. Now, with that said, the only way we can take advantage of the fact that you should never lose a negative round is if we understand much more concretely what the advantages to the negative are and how to use them most effectively. Because as the current meta stands, people are not employing these strategies well. So there's one essential benefit the negative has. Everyone knows what it is. Time skews. Okay? You can force the app to spend 4 minutes responding to 7 and 3 minutes responding to 6. That's a huge advantage. In a world in which time is currency, because it allows you to make arguments, you should have to be half as efficient as the as the affirmative before the app should be able to meet you argument for argument. Now, this will only be true though if you adopt a strategy which requires the affirmative to answer every argument you make. If you adopt a strategy which allows the affirmative to not answer every argument you make, then the strategic benefit that goes away. Let's give some simple examples. Suppose you read 3 off in the NC, okay? A K with some sort of weird alt, a DA, and case friends. The 1AR in this situation, if they're smart, will do something the following, okay? A 1 minute long 1AR theory shell about your alt, okay? And then link trends or impact trends to the K. And that's all they'll do. They won't do anything else. Why? Because this will have taken you, let's say, 4 minutes to read. So now they're just responding to 3 minutes with their 4 minutes, and they have a massive positive time trade-off. And now you have to split your time, because you have 6 minutes to respond to these 2 arguments. So suppose you spend 3 minutes on each. Or suppose you'll go, theory's not that big a deal, so you spend 2 minutes here, and 4 minutes here. Now, what does the clever 2AR do? They spend 3 minutes here, and explain why it comes first. And now, they have 3 minutes to your 2 minutes, and 1 minute to your nothing. Or 1 minute to your K if you happen to if they had to do a lot of weighing between those layers. But the point is, you're in a bad position. And that was after they spent 3 minutes turning your K, so 4 minutes was probably already dangerous. Because had they instead spent 3 minutes here, they still would have 3 to 4, 3 to let's say 2, as a time trade-off, right? Or maybe even 3 to 3. And your time trade-off is still, for the most part, disappeared. Dangerous situation. Right? You have opened yourself to a whole host of problems. Alternatively, right? Maybe there's not a K, maybe instead the strategy is something like T, counterplan, fill NC, and then turns to the AC. Well, first question the affirmative is going to ask you, what's the status of the counterplan? If you say conditional, then the 1AR gets a new 1AR theory out. Kind of bad. Any good debater has their kind of bad shell down to 30 seconds tops, especially because they can just take advantage of your voters that you've already read on the T shell, most likely, which means we may be dealing with a 25-second kind of bad shell. Now, they're going to be going for answers to T. Let's say they spend 2 minutes here. And with those 2 minutes, they include an RBI, because that seems to be something people do nowadays. I don't understand why, but judges are voting for them. Oh well, we now have to deal with that strategic reality. And then, okay, they concede the NC framework and go for turns under the NC framework to kick out of the answer to the F. Again, the 2 NR strategic advantages have vanished. Right? You waste the time on the counterplan, unless you happen to be able to avoid the NC turn, but why would they make those turns then? Right? You lose your turns to the app, most likely. And, more troubling, there's no good way to divide up your time. Right? A 25-second condo bad shell can easily be gone for 3 minutes, which means you need to spend at least enough time on condo bad to cover a 3-minute collapse to condo good, or at least be able to weigh your T argument, which means you really gotta spend 2.5 minutes, approximately, on this. Right? And I bet this RBI issue, so maybe you spend a minute answering the RBI, right? But now you spent basically 3.5 minutes before you've even gone to any ability to defend your own offense, right? And now the 2AR can collapse to anything and has a positive time trade-off against the 2 once again. Again, not a great situation. So maybe you think, okay, well, the poem here is condo, so let's make it unconditional. You, Devin?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me mark you off. You were late. Late on the first day. Kind of embarrassing. Okay. Positive time trade-off, right? That's unfortunate. And it's recorded, so now for all time, the fact that you were late the first day will be existing on video. And I draw attention to this fact for anyone who later watched the video. How unfortunate. Okay. The counterplan, right? So maybe like, okay, don't make it conditional, make it unconditional. The problem is if it's unconditional, then any good negative, or affirmative, answers T, right? Maybe spend a lot of time answering T, make sure you really can't go for it, 2 minutes. And then makes 15 poems. Why? Because your position's unconditional, which means every poem is a no-risk issue for the affirmative. They win a single poem with a net benefit and you just lose. Right? Because you had an unconditional advocacy. And now defensive responses, namely that it's not competitive, suddenly become an instant reason for the act wins unless you lose it on theory. It's an unfortunate strategic pickle. Now, does negative still have the advantage in all these rounds? Yes, of course they do. Why? Because affirmatives are bad. Right? No affirmative is adequately prepared. No act is ready to go for just the RBI debate or turns to the NC this well-written act. In other words, acts are not set up well to take advantage of what I call the dangers of the 1AR reset. But any good act will be at least somewhat prepared for a good 1AR reset, because that's the optimal strategic strategy for the affirmative in the way debate is currently being played. In the current metagame, if the act is going for the AC, they're largely making a mistake, which is why in most of the rounds that I judge, whom famously dislike theory and critique arguments, right, end up voting on theory arguments almost all the time, because 1AR is recognized as a strategic incentive to not go for substance, given the way the game is currently played. I almost voted on an RBI once. I did vote on an RBI once. That's what the situation as it currently exists. So horrifying. Alright? So, we need to deal with the situation somehow. Right? We need to somehow change the metagame. And what I'm going to suggest is we need to attend to an old distinction, one that you are probably familiar with, the difference between horizontal and vertical layering. So, anyone familiar with this term can define it for me? Yep.
Maybe horizontal layering is like more off-case positions versus, and like just like proliferation of different arguments, versus vertical layering is like proliferation of a lot of one argument and really getting the depth of like one off-case position. Good.
So you're close. You reverse them as is currently used in LD. Vertical layering is generally layers between different off positions, and horizontal layering is in depth on one. But it's not a question of depth on a single position. It's instead a question of, are they layers? Right, so that would not necessarily be layering. I could read a 7-minute K and only have one layer to it, right? And I'm just really, really well prepped on that layer. But there are still layering distinctions within a given layer. And this is the distinction between a vertical layer, which is layering between reasons to vote for you, and horizontal layering, which is layering between reasons to vote on one particular type of argument. So an example of vertical layering would be a theory argument, or a T-shell, and a critique, and an NC, and turns to the F. These are each supposed to operate on independent layers. If we win the value criterion, then only the NC offense matters. If we win that theory comes first, only the theory shell matters. What's your name?
Joel Stern.
You were the one in traffic.
Yes.
Got it. Alright, you're checked off. So, the way you should think about this is think about it in terms of offense. You should always define layering in terms of offense. So, vertical layering is layering between pieces of offense. Horizontal layering is layering that makes relevant pieces of offense. And what I'm going to suggest is that the trick to NCAC strategy, the reason it's not done anymore, is debaters are no longer prepared or flexible when it comes to horizontal layering. They're very good when it comes to vertical layering. People do not prep the way they used to, and do not have the same sort of arguments for horizontal layering strategies that they once did. And this means that debaters only ever think about a layering question as a question of vertical layering. They think about, look, a really long dense K or a really long NC could be strategic in its own right because you have really good arguments for it. You're really well prepped on it. But they don't think about it as a position where you can have layers of augmentation. But there are ways to develop layering even within a single reason to vote for you, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So, how is this going to work? Well, the first thing I want to suggest is this. A lot of the problems that currently exist with negative strategies are that they encourage one AR resets to whatever layer happens to be highest. So when you have vertical layering, right, if you have a T shell, counterplan, NC, and AC, any good affirmative will take advantage of one of the following options. First, they want AR reset by putting all offensive whatever the highest layer. Right, an RVI on T, or turns to the purpose of the counterplan, a new 1ARK, something like that. So they'll either read a new position, which tries to mute everything the negative did, or they try to just turn and position the affirmative, the negative already read. Second, the case tends to be seeded right by the negative in these situations, or at least there's not a lot of answers to the case, which means extensions from the AC become very, very easy. And most affirmatives that are currently set up have underviews that are designed to interact with multiple different OS case positions, and suddenly the underview becomes relevant. I've seen an awful lot of rounds recently in which the actual substance of the affirmative case is at most 4 minutes long, and they have about 2 minutes of T and theory and K preempts. This should, in theory, make the negative time trade-off easier. Right. If you think about it, what the affirmative has done is ceded 2 of their already not enough minutes to the negative to control whether or not they become relevant or not. Because in a situation in which they do this, if you are well prepared and don't have to read T or critique or whatever they're preempting, all of those preempts simply go away. Right? Those preempts no longer have relevance. So they just ceded you 2 minutes of their AC each time if you have the flexibility from a strategic standpoint to not rely on one of the positions they're preempting, which should be an ideal situation for the negative, but I don't see people taking advantage of it. The 1AR time trade-off only works if 1AR has to answer every argument you make, and current negative strategies are not designed to force the opponent to do that. So what is the strategy that forces them to do that? Well, here I'm going to outline what I take to be the optimal NC-AC strategy. The first thing that you have to do is you should never spend more than 2 minutes reading your NC. Okay? It is a 2-5 split at a minimum. Often it's better to have a longer split than that. So at TOC my senior year, my favorite negative case was 36 seconds long. Right? My strategy would be 36-second NC, and then 6 minutes and 24 seconds answering the AF. I had more time answering the AF than the AF had time reading the AF. Right? Was what most of my rounds at TOC my senior year looked like. And it worked pretty well. But that was an unusual situation, not the general strategy, generally about 2 minutes. And what do you have to do in this NC? Well, the NC should have some sort of framework layer which interacts with the framework layer of the opponent. It should be independent. And here, you're going to have something which I'm going to call the meta-ethical layer. I'm using meta-ethical here as a catch-all term. For a strategic scheme where it doesn't have to be meta-ethical, it could be a theoretically justified standard, right? An argument that, util is the best ethical theory according to, for fairness reasons, or we should use data ontology, whatever, right? Something that is going to claim to be preclusive as a reason to use your framework. A roll the ballot would be a classic example of this, right? Some sort of education-based argument for why we should care about these impacts. Something that frames what a value criterion argument should look like. Then, argument for your value criterion, which you're going to claim uniquely links back to meta-ethical layer, and that you're going to claim links back to whatever the implicit meta-ethical layer of the affirmative was. So the affirmative said we should use util because states can only be utilitarian agents, then you should make some reason why your argument for the value criterion would suggest that actually states can only do your ethical theory adequately. Some sort of argument of that sort. Meta-ethical layer, which comes before them, and you give a reason why it comes before their meta-ethical layer. One of the most common mistakes I see is negatives these days, even with being like critiques, tend to just read the position and then answer the F. When I debated, it was very common, like what I would do is when I was reading the NC, after every NC card, I would stop reading and extend interaction with the F. Right? This is still done somewhat in K-debate, especially in link debate, or including the app. So sometimes we'll see debaters after they read links and be like, here's the link, this impact implies this part of the app. But I basically never see it with NCs anymore, and I don't understand why. Because it's an ideal strategy if they have framework arguments and you have framework arguments. Why? Because any good affirmative, if they're going for a framework debate, does not want to spend time on the NC. Any good affirmative wants to spend all the time on the app, extend the app, and use the app to take out the NC. That's the only ideal 1AR strategy, that's what I'm going to suggest, and the way you prevent that from happening is by giving actual substantive interaction as you're reading the NC. So, you read a meta-ethical layer of some sort, remember we're using this conclusively, and then interact, right? Extemporaneously. Then you read an argument for your value criterion, and you interact. Then, you read an NC contention, which links back to your value criterion, and which you're going to claim link turns the app value criterion, and then you're going to weight it. So in the NC, you're going to weigh the NC against the F. And then at the bottom of the NC, you're going to make the following argument. Don't allow 2AR weighing against arguments weighed in the NC. And there's going to be two arguments you're going to make for this. The first argument you're going to make, or the first warrant for this, is that arguments are new if not made in the first possible speech. The NC and AC arguments exist following the reading of the NC, and so the 1AR is the first available speech where they can weigh, and the NC-NR is the first available speech you could weigh. You chose to weigh, so your weighing arguments are not new. Their arguments would be new because they don't make until the 2AR. So, nature of new arguments is the first argument. B, they would have two speeches to answer your weighing, but you would have none to answer theirs. And in a world in which debate uses contestation as the principal establishment, but you establish arguments via principal contestation, so because the argument was contestable and yet won, that's what makes them true in debate. So because debate uses contestation as the principal order to establish arguments, in a world in which you had no ability to respond to your argument, they had two speeches to respond to yours as one where there's no ability to establish weighing arguments because there's no principal available contestation. So you make this argument. And the negative assumes this means they just have to answer this weighing argument, but actually this is a general argument, or the affirmative thinks that those have to answer this, but this is a general argument that's going to apply to all the weighing arguments you're going to make, because when you get to the F, the rule in the F is after every single turn you make, or after every single framework interaction argument you make, or after every single argument for why their value criterion collapses to your value criterion, you will make a weighing argument for why that argument matters more than some of the affirmative arguments. After every single negative argument, you will do this. Why? Because the affirmative does not, if you execute the strategy well, have enough time to weigh. They just do not, right? They do not have time to weigh the AC adequately because they have 7 minutes of arguments they need to answer because every single one of the 7 minutes of arguments had interaction with the app, which was explicitly stated and weighed. They do not have time, unless they're twice as efficient as you, to actually get to the weighing part of the round. Almost ever. And if you've made the argument they don't get 2AR weighing, and you have weighed every single argument, then any argument they do not answer is an instant reason you win. Because there is a conceded argument that had weigh in the NC, which they do not get to weigh against in the 2AR. There is not a way for them to come back from that if you have set up the strategy correctly. So you make this argument. Now you get to the F, okay? And against the F, we're going to need to increase the number of layers. Actually, sorry, we should stop. Before that, we need to talk about this NC contention. The biggest threat to the NC-AC strategies I'm going to develop here is a situation in which the 1AR concedes to the NC framework and goes for link checks. That is by far the most dangerous situation. Which means your goal for the NC contention should not be what is the most important negative argument you can think of. No. Your goal should be what is the truest single negative argument on the topic. Your argument is just like, yeah, this is just correct. This is just like the true, like, if there was a reason to negate, it was just clearly reason to negate and could not be turned, it would be this. I don't care if it's not the most convincing argument. I don't care if it's not the most compelling or biggest impact argument. The point is, you pick the argument that's hardest to turn, and the entire point of this strategy is to develop a lot of layers within the round via framework arguments, via theoretical arguments, via rule utilitarian arguments. We'll get to all this stuff. But you come up with a whole host of reasons why your offense matters most. The reason for this is a weighing argument is not a high-risk scenario. They can't turn a weighing argument if you have just a whole bunch of layers, and the way they can turn a contention and concede all those arguments. If they concede all of your layering arguments and turn the NC, you're in trouble. But if they can only try to turn individual weighing arguments while other things weigh more, all of your weighing arguments can come to bear to deal with that situation. So you want the most unturnable negative argument that happens to exist on the topic. And then you're going to develop a whole bunch of layers as to why that one's going to come first. So you have your most unturnable negative argument you can think of, and you can make everything about why that's most important. So you've done this, you've had a meta-ethical layer. Your meta-ethical comes before their arguments for the AC, you've given that interaction, only you link back to it, and you also link back to whatever their implicit meta-ethical principle is. Now we get to the F. Okay? The following are the non-negotiable layers of NC framework debate that you should have anytime you answer an AC framework. First, their theory means your theory. I will give an example of an NC versus util app day on NC as the simplest example because what you're all most familiar with. We can talk through particular illustrations of this later if you're curious. So, their theory means your framework. What would this say? It would be my argument, so this is an argument I would make every round of a negative deontological or virtual NC, which is if util is true means rule util is true, and if rule util is true, the rule is my NC. A non-negotiable argument if you're answering a util app. Because it allows you to concede all of the arguments for util and say even if all those are true, nevertheless util means rule util and the rule is my NC, value criterion. Second, procedurally, their theory means yours. What I mean by procedurally is saying a decision procedure. So, who here is familiar with the Tetlock study that says we're really bad at making predictions? Oh. This is really unfortunate. Okay, there's this famous study done by Philip Tetlock in which he took over 80,000 predictions about what was going to happen in the economy, what was going to happen in national affairs, what was going to happen in conflict between nations, and had these experts predict what they thought was going to happen, and what they found was that the experts were literally less accurate than random chance would have been in making decisions. Right? The Cardoffman debate says that experts in the areas they know best are less accurate than chimps throwing darts, because at least we've distributed their guesses randomly across the possibility space. Right? So what's the argument? Human beings are really bad at making decisions. Another example of this, people know about the Akbar test used in NICUs. So after a child was born, there's this really simple 10-question thing where you mark each question 1 through 3. And if you just use this, you get a score below a certain point, you take the child to the NICU. And this revolutionized infant medicine because doctors, with all of their knowledge, with all their ability to assess the complexities, were far less accurate than a high school or a college student given this checklist and asked to do it in assessing how likely there's going to be a serious complication. Human beings are notoriously bad at decision making, and so we often find decision procedures a more effective way to make decisions. So what do you say? Okay, act util means will util, and will util is on my NC. And even if that's not true, we should be assessing consequences directly. Turns out humans are really bad at making decisions under your ethical framework. We are really bad at using the categorical comparative. So even if the categorical comparative is true, we're extraordinarily bad at figuring out what is universalizable for whatever reason. Or extraordinarily bad at figuring out what will maximize utility, and so we should use this decision procedure. This is the most reliable way to make decisions. And guess what the decision procedure happens to be? Oh, it's my value criterion. Right? So, their theory means your theory, and procedurally, their theory means that you should use your theory as a way to make decisions even if their theory is true. Third, their theory is just unworkable in some important way. So these tend to be the worst arguments made in debate rounds, but they are strategic. These are things like you can't calculate the consequences for util, infinite universe Boston style arguments. Complete nonsense, but strategic. They don't take very long to make. This is why they exist in every round. Next. You make a reason why, whatever their arguments for the value criterion are, whatever their argument for util was, will ultimately lead to your value criterion. So, if they had a theoretically justified argument for their value criterion, you will say, no, my standard is more educational and more fair. Or if they had states utilitarian, you'll say, actually, states are my ethical theory. And you will weigh that, right? So this is a turn to their highest framework layer with weighing. And you will weigh this argument to turn against their argument for why their layer is highest. And then lastly, you can make 1 to 2 ants to each of the other ones to the value criterion, just so they can't easily extend something and try to interact with the NC. This should maybe take you a minute and a half if you're doing it efficiently. Okay? So suppose we have at most 2 minutes here, right? And now a minute and a half here. We're at 3.5 minutes, and so far they need to deal with this meta-ethical layer, the argument that your value criterion links back to their meta-ethical layer, the argument that you link to their value criterion with your NC offense and outweigh, the argument that their theory will collapse to your theory, which means your offense comes first, the argument that even if their theory is true, we can't assess their offense, so we need to use your offense first, that their theory is unworkable, so only your theory can operate, and that their argument for their value criterion actually implies your value criterion. Okay? Very difficult one I already deal with on the framework layer, and that's just to make it so your NC contention doesn't come first. That's not to establish any offense for them, but just to make sure that your one offensive argument isn't the highest layer in this debate. They have to somehow deal with all of that stuff. And remember, all these arguments are weighed explicitly and interacted explicitly with the AC arguments. And so it's very difficult for them to just say my arguments come first, because you actually have individualized arguments for each one of your layers for why it comes before the affirmative layers. Similarly, you just can't it doesn't matter if your argument for util is a theoretical argument for util, which comes before all these arguments, if it still means that util just is rule util, if it just means the way that we assess impact under util is UNC. These layers are very hard to preclude at that sort of layer as well. Okay, now we still have 3.5 minutes for just turns to the F. Okay? So we have 3.5 minutes to just turn the affirmative offense. The beautiful thing about the situation debate currently exists, most apps actually spend at most 3.5 minutes reading an offense anyway, so you actually get an equal time trade-off answering their arguments to the amount of time that they spend making their arguments. This is a great situation for you. Why? Because the negative has the advantage of reactivity. In other words, if you want to go for link turns to an advantage, you don't need to read the impact card. They read the impact card. So you get to pick, do I want to go for the link turn strategy or the impact turn strategy? And then they've already granted you one of the links. So if you go for the impact turn, they have to read the link, but you don't, so you get that time trade-off. You can accept their link and just go for the impact turns. Or, right, if they read the impact and you just want the link turns, you just read the link turns and don't have to read the impact. Since you get to pick which part you're going to contest, they actually spend twice as much time on any given argument as you do, because you get to pick link or impact, they had to read both. Which means you should be able to get positive time trade-off off of this 3.5 minutes of turns, because you only have to read 1/2 of each argument. Or less than that if you're going for like an internal link story. So you should get a massive time trade-off on this position, and what you're going to want to do is make offense. Now, the first thing you should do though, before you get to the individualized turning of their arguments, is an overview. And this overview should be some very general argument which you claim is going to come before their offense. So if I'm hitting a util app, the most common version of this, in fact, it often be two, right? I need two of these overviews. The first is human beings incredibly bad at assessing utilitarian impacts, so we should use some decision procedure, right? Come out some about decision procedure arguments later, we can talk about them. And then second, human beings bad at assessing impacts, so we should only look to impacts that are statistically verified, right, via actual robust peer-reviewed studies, right? Because otherwise there's no way to assess the impact of anecdotes. So a really quick cogent piece of evidence that says basically always use studies to make decisions, and then a study which is a turn to their position, and I'm like, they don't have statistics, right? They have scenario testing. Turns out it's not statistically verified, you should not be willing to vote on it. Really nice high layer argument. Why? Because no matter what offense they're winning, this can operate at a higher level with very clear weight impacts which they're going to have to get through. So you make 1 or 2 overview arguments of that sort, right? Something that says, look, they're using their own value criterion wrong, this is how you should actually go about approaching it, right, under their own offense. Then you're going to answer their offense, which is as many turns as possible, okay? And you just want turns, and turns, and turns, but the important thing is after each turn, you will weigh it. So you make a turn and then you weigh. You make a turn and you weigh. I've had some debaters mess up this part of the strategy before, and what happens is they'll make a turn, and they'll be like, my impact outweighs. No. If you're making a link turn, you don't outweigh both sides of your impact, you have the same impact. If you're making a link turn, you weigh on the strength of your link versus their link. If you make an impact turn, you weigh the size of your impact versus their impact. For some reason, debaters mess this up all the time. If you link turn their strategy, you can't go for your impact outweighs, it's the same impact. It's a question of who has the stronger link back to that impact. There are some weird exceptions to that, but we're not going to get into my argument shapes lecture right now. So, what you want is a turn, and you want to weigh the turn, and you want as many of these as possible, along with whatever very defensive arguments are going to be most efficient. Right? In general, this is going to be some combination of impact defense against whatever impact you don't happen to have good link turns against, which is going to make your weighing life easier. Uniqueness presses. If you're going for a higher link, if you're going for a basically link turn strategy, right, some combination of impact defense against whatever internal links you don't happen to have strong link turns to, and uniqueness presses, because uniqueness is just always helpful with link turns, right? Simple strategic principles. If you're going for more of an impact turn strategy, obviously leave off the uniqueness stuff, but still impact defense, right? If you're going for an impact turn strategy, read defense against their impacts in it, right? Their reason global warming is going to kill everyone, you better put defense against before you impact turn global warming, say it's good for crop development. Don't go for that impact turn though, it's not a good one. There's much better ones like that. Luckily, none of the topics next year have global warming advantage for the negative, for the affirmative. Even the one that's about global warming. Just carbon, what?
Ecosystems?
Ecosystems are like rivers though, right? Like, being able to assume we have a river, maybe. Ecosystems is the best argument, right? But the one that was actually designed for this, the carbon subsidies, is not a big enough link. Getting rid of carbon subsidies will not stop global warming. I have no idea what the app is going to do on that topic. Like, the app is true, we shouldn't have them, it's just like bad economics reasons. I do not like that topic. I want a global warming topic, but that's not the one. Anyway, not important right now. Okay, so you go for sort of very turn-heavy strategy with whatever relevant defense is going to make your arguments most efficient. So here's the situation. The affirmative could try to say, actually let me weigh in the 2AR, right? And so not have to deal with all these individual layers. But what happens if they do this? Here's the thing. It takes time to make that argument. It takes time to answer that argument. And the 2NR has this super convincing rejoinder, like, wait a minute. You clearly had extra time in your 1AR to answer this argument that you don't have to weigh. Why didn't you just use that time to weigh? You say the 1AR doesn't have time to weigh, but you clearly did, because it took you 20 seconds to answer this argument, which is time you could have used to weigh. So it's a beautiful argument, because the real reason why this argument is false, like the real reason the affirmative should not be able to weigh, is really something not have to weigh, something like the 1AR is just so short, that they don't actually have time to weigh well. But if they make that argument, this is beautiful rejoinder. It's like, why'd you spend time complaining about how short your speech was? You could have weighed in that time. Right? So it's an incredibly difficult argument at a conceptual level to answer, given the weird mechanics of the debate act. Right? It's only just actually substantively true, right? The argument would be new if it was made in the 2AR, and isn't new when it was made in the original NC speech. And so judges, I've never seen anyone lose this argument if they're actually going for it. Which means the affirmative is in an incredibly difficult position here. They can try a 1AR reset, but it's not like you've done anything theoretically objectionable, right? It's not as though you can make condo cap, right? Like, literally, you have an NC and an AC. And judges think this is like the quintessential, like, local school strategy, right? It's just like what core LD is. There's nothing theoretically objectionable about not reading a T-shell and not reading a critique and not reading the counterplan, right? And yet, it's incredibly difficult to deal with as the 1AR. This is especially true in the current metagame, because debaters are not prepared to answer and extend their asks. Debaters just are not good at on-case debate the way they used to be. Debaters are very, very good at extending their ask to interact with case. I've seen a lot of debaters who are incredibly good at extending this advantage and reading 2 cards about how this advantage link turns the critique. Or extending their framework and having this incredibly good 1AR reset for why the countable the valid is truth testing, why the position link takes out the K on that level. Debaters are very, very good right now at reading apps designed for the purpose of multifunctional offense. So many apps I read have contention cards that just aren't very good contention cards and are clearly really just preempts to T. Right? Like, they pretend it's a contention card, but does it really talk about their advocacy? No. Right? What it really does is it's a preparation to link turn T. Or it's a preparation to interact with the counterplan, or something like that. Apps spend a huge amount of time with that, so if you just don't have those positions, those preempts no longer become super valuable. And because those, in fact, arguments no longer become super valuable, they just tend to be pretty easy to answer. So current apps are not well set up for on-case debate. Apps are currently set up, given the way the metagame currently works, to interact with off-case positions. So if you just don't have that plethora of off-case positions, a lot of the app arguments not strategically set up, and the app is just not prepared for this sort of on-case debate the way it used to be. Good. Oh, one other thing, a lot of these arguments can actually be analytic. They shouldn't all be analytic. You should have a decent set of cards, right? But you should have some analytic arguments as well. Just make sure you're still weighing them. Is there anything I'm missing from this preliminary set of layers? No, I don't think so. Okay, so what's the situation for the 1AR? Well, best case scenario for the 1AR, you happen to do something they have a 1AR K designed against, right? That's the best case scenario for the 1AR. They've got, like, you read a Kant NC and they've got a, Kantian ethics bad 1AR critique or something. Or you actually just said something incredibly offensive and they can go for a discourse K in the 1AR against what you said. Because there's very, very few, if any, theoretical layers they can get here, and so they really tend to be reduced to some sort of critical layer if they want a 1AR reset. But if you just set up this position right, it's very hard to get those 1AR resets. A couple of principles of strategy for developing that. First, often the best sort of end is the office contacting me. Let me see. No. So, first thing, if you're going for a more right-leaning position, you always want to combine it with something to make it sound a lot more progressive. Examples of this. If you're leading a, so here's a great example, the gun rights topic, okay? We should be able to have handguns. Best NC I helped people write on that topic was basically this argument. It was just classic Lockean social contract, government, like people have a right to bear arms, right? quite far right position, right? Like actually just sort of like classic NRA talking points, right? Second Amendment-y stuff. Not great thing to be using in debate. So what do? Well, we repackage it, right? We package the following argument. The locking social contract argument became this argument. The government only, which is actually Locke's argument, just put in slightly different terms. The government only has a right to disarm its citizenry insofar as the government fulfills its obligation to protect the citizenry. Right? The government has the right to disarm the citizens because it fulfills its obligation to protect them. And then the contention was just a bunch of reasons why the government has failed to protect lots of minority communities via adequate policing, right? Where police actually terrorize local communities rather than protect them, and the duty of protection has been vacated. And then the argument is just this. If the government fails to protect its communities, what right does it have to disarm them so they can't protect themselves? Much more persuasive fill and see than what you normally see in the current context of debate. Much harder to develop one I reset against. Even if there are really nice arguments against Lockean philosophy and Lockean social contract theory, when you cash it out this way, it's very easy to be like, you're right. A lot of what Locke says is probably wrong. But he's absolutely right that the government has no right to disarm communities the government itself is terrorizing. Incredibly intuitive principle, just cash in a more deontological turn because you can use more classical Lockean arguments for it. Similar, another example, the living wage topic. Right? The best fill and see interact with every single act, no matter what the act was, basically except the Prisons Act, which we had to have a different strategy for. Oh man, you all are so young. None of you have debated the living wage topic, right?
In middle school.
Alright, middle school. Well, my example is no longer useful. I didn't coach that this last year. Okay, anyway. Living wage topic, right? Libertarianism and see, look, we distribute taxation bad, government can't force people to do things with their money. Right? Problem is, very far right. Also, libertarianism is a sort of sophomore philosophy, it's not that. Like, I don't like libertarianism. Super useful in debate purposes, but bad theory. Even like of the conservative theories that are plausible, it's not one of them. Anyway, but still, really useful for debate. But how do you make this plausible? Right? Living wage topic is like, oh look, we should just let rich people, exploit poor people by keeping all the money for themselves. Not an easy argument to win in the current debate context, right? Doesn't look great. So what do? Well, we read it this way. We read libertarianism and see, and then we read a counterplan that said, utilize mass reparations, right? Billions or trillions of dollars in reparations for historical injustices. And our argument was this. The act is an intolerable middle ground. Either current property is justly distributed, in which case what right do we have to force other people to do things with their money which they don't want to? Or it's unjustly distributed, in which case why are we letting the wealthy keep their money in the first place? We need to take it by force. Right. If wealth is currently actually a consequence of theft, we should treat it as theft and redistribute it by force, not as a question of redistribution, but instead a principle of retribution, right? Of giving people back what they deserve. Or it's justly distributed, in which case you have no way to tell people what they can and cannot do with their money if other people are willing to do the job for that amount. Much more persuasive and see all of a sudden, right? A position that says, you know what, you're right, right? What's the true answer to libertarianism? The true answer to libertarianism is, but property is not justly distributed in the first place, right? Well, people don't have property rights over what they currently have. So the answer preempts and says, you're right. Here's the situation. Either property is not justly distributed, currently is an unjust system of exploitation, in which case, if libertarianism is true, we should afford, right? Like, what does the act say? The act says, if you hire people, you have to pay them a living wage, but you could also just keep the money for yourself if you don't want to hire anyone at all. No! That's intolerable, is the position of the negative. Right? If this money is unjust right now, then it should be taken by force. It should not be up to employers to decide whether to hire someone, just if they happen to decide them, then we're going to impose on them certain redistributive requirements by paying them a just wage. Okay. And so you give this sort of task to the argument, it becomes far more persuasive, especially in the current debate climate, and it becomes far more difficult to develop some sort of 1ARK strategy against it, because the negative said, look, I'm already in agreement with your underlying principles, I'm simply giving an alternative way to articulate this. And what's really nice is if you're well prepped in this debate, you should have 2 in our arguments for why it's valuable for debaters to learn how to use the language and vocabulary and concepts of people on the right for purposes of political debate and show how they lead to left-leaning principles. Right? This is just super plausible. Like, it's incredibly plausible that debaters right now are incredibly bad at talking to conservatives. I know, as someone who is comparatively conservative for the debate community, I find debaters difficult to talk to, and I'm incredibly liberal by like general society standards. Right? Ordinary conservatives just do not know how to talk to debaters, and debaters do not know how to talk to ordinary conservatives. But there's a really good argument this is a really valuable thing to be able to do. Namely, to be able to use more conservative value premises and actually show how they lead to the same conclusions as those debaters like. There's really, really nice studies that say the only way to actually change people's minds is to be able to use their own value language, right? Use things that they care about and show how they lead to that. That's actually a way to get people to change their mind. And to be well prepped in this debate, it's very easy to deal with the 1ARK resets, right? Because you're right, some of the language I use might not be great, but it's very good to become felicitous of that language because otherwise you give up the possibility of persuading people who don't already agree with you and turn debate into a microcosm, right? If you can already have shown that you're using these more deontological principles to a more radical, left-leaning conclusion, this sort of link-turn strategy against any 1ARK reset becomes very, very intuitive and plausible. So, if you're well set up on that debate, right, if you know the best 1AR strategy is the 1ARK reset and you're very comfortable with that debate because you've been prepping it correctly, that's really the 2NR you need to be worried about. Then, the only other two options, all in on turns to the NC, or lots turns to the NC. Indeed, any situation an opponent uses this, you need to have some turns to the NC. Turns to the NC is your best friend, right, if you can find some way to turn it. It's going to be difficult. Any good negative business is just going to make a true negative argument as their thing their value criterion prioritizes, but still, you gotta put something you can do here. Just because that's the thing that negative chance wastes most of the 2NR time on. And then it comes down to something like, okay, I will cede your value criterion and then make the sort of arguments for why procedurally their theory means your theory, and so like it's really different. Like there are ways you can try to reset under conceding their value criterion and redeveloping it, but it's just a lot more difficult to explain why never intending harm actually means util, or the best way to achieve that is a decision procedure under util, something like that. Why? Because the negative has the principle of reactivity, right? What you should do as a negative, you should have 2 or 3 NCs, and you should pick whichever NC you think has the best strategic interactions with that particular app framework, right? And then, because you have the principle of reactivity, it's very, very difficult for the affirmative to make the same sort of layers of distinct argumentation as you do. Right? You have your NC that's designed to have the decision procedure arguments made against util. You have your NC that's designed to show how concerns of social equity and social justice, right, or systematic violence, things of this sort, should be approached in some other way. So you pick your NC that interacts well with a particular app, and it's very difficult for the app to reset that debate at the other layer, especially if you actually have line-by-line answers to every single card in the position, because it means they can't just extend things as though they concede it. So, last situation, what I would do as the opponent when I hit strategies like this is I would just brute force my way through it. I'd be like, I'm going to take on the challenge, I'm going to show that I'm smarter than you, and I'm just going to win my app as true. Honestly, it's sometimes the best strategy, right? If you're really well frontlined, you can sometimes just pull it off, because maybe you can be twice as efficient as them and answer every single argument, especially since they have to wait, right? So the one saving grace for the affirmative in this situation is you had to make an argument and weigh it. Well, if they just answer the argument, they don't have to answer the weighing. Or if they just answer the weighing, they don't have to answer the argument, right? So a particularly efficient 1AR can just make it through this, maybe, if they're incredibly well frontlined. But in the 1AR is salvageable, the problem becomes the 2AR. We need to collapse for one of those arguments instead of 6 minutes answering their, 10 seconds of link defense against the turn. It's very difficult, but so you can just make it through the 1AR still. So now in the 2NR, right? We know the sort of strategies the 1AR can adopt. We've talked about one of them, the K reset strategy, and how you need to prep for that debate. The other 2 possibilities, the turns to the NC, right? You need to over-allocate on turns to the NC. If you're using the NCAC strategy, you need to over-allocate on turns to the NC. It is intolerable to not over-allocate on them, right? They spend a minute on turns to the NC, you might actually spend 3 minutes answering those turns, just to put it beyond doubt. Because the rest of your speech is going to be making the NC most important. But now in the 2NR, you have a couple of options, okay? You actually have 2 options. You should think about, is the primary goal of this 2NR, do I want the judge at the end of the debate to vote on my NC offense, or do I want them to vote for whichever turn to the app happens to be charged? Okay? Those are your 2 options. And whichever one it is, right, you almost always want to shadow extend the other. So my general rule of thumb is for the negative, right, the app's rule of thumb, never, it's not even a rule of thumb, it's a universal. Do not go for more than 1 piece of offense in the 2AR, you don't have time, right? Affirmative should collapse to a single piece of offense, negative should collapse to 1 piece of offense and shadow extend another piece of offense, right? Negative should go for 2 pieces of offense, but really it's 1, but 2, but really you know which one you're really going for. But you have to, but it's really just, you always do. So, if you're going for the NC contention as your main piece of offense, You go for the NC contention, and then you pick two of the layers that you are going to say come first. Right? Maybe it's their decision procedure collapses to UNC and your meta that comes first. Or maybe it's you actually link turn their highest layer and outweigh under their argument for it. Whatever, right? You understand based on the arguments they made which two layers that you want to go for, right? And you pick two framing layers and explain why they come first, right? And then you just answer any possible reset strategies they might have. So any arguments they might like link under you, that criterion or whatever, you just answer those. But you only go for two of these like seven, I counted this at one point, I think it's 7 layers. Right? You go for two of them, right? You go for two of these layers, and then answer any sort of relayering they might have. So you've extended your offense, you go for 2 layers, and then you shadow extend something as an answer to the AF just to waste their time, because the opponent is in bad position if they have to overcover on the NC. If you spend like a minute extending your turn to 2 AR, then you have to spend like 45 seconds on that turn at least. And that's a really unfortunate time trade-off in the world where they, right? Any situation in which they have to spend more than half the time you spend shadow extending something answering it, it's good for you. So if you spend a minute extending a turn to the app and they have to spend over 30 seconds, it's a positive time trade-off in a world of 6 to 3 time division. So you pick 1 or 2 turns to the app, which you think you can go and weigh, and which you think they might go answer, but they're going to have to overcompensate and overcover. Because in that situation, there's very few outs for the 2AR given adequate time trade-off strategies. So that's the essential strategy if you're going for the NC. In contrast, if you're going for turns to the app is the main thing, then the first thing, if there are any possible turns to the NC, you overcover them. You overcover the turns to the NC because the most dangerous situation they can concede it. And then you extend 1 argument for why your NC comes first, and then spend about 4 minutes answering the app, right? Extending defense against their offense, extending your turn, weighing your turn, going really in depth on that layer, and doing impact prioritization. Oh, and then you spend obviously a minute to 2 minutes preempting the 2AR just anyway, because that's what good negatives do, right? Always preempt the affirmative. But I'm not going to, like, that's a principle like basic negative strategy. This is not going to be a basic negative strategy to an lecture, but this very particular strategy. Good, so that's the idea. The last situation, right, is the really fun one for you, which is a situation where they've actually got like a deep, like, oh man, they actually have a pretty good turn. I could see them collapsing in 3 minutes on that turn. Then what do? You just pick the NC framework and just go for your turns to the app. The biggest mistake people make is, so the only people who ever try strategies even kind of like this anymore are basically people I coached to do framework debate. But the thing is, like even when I was very senior, like I would not use this strategy very often. I just had too much fun having framework debates, so I just spent like 4 minutes answering the AC framework plus my 2-minute NC, so I'd only have like a minute on the contention. It's not nearly as strategic. Because you want the option, if they link turn the contention with some amount of link turn offense, to be able to kick the NC, which means you really do want to highly invest in generating offense under the AC value criterion. That's just in general an excellent sort of strategy. And so I highly, highly, highly recommend being open to that strategy in a situation. If you think they've actually got some good turns, just pick the NC framework. They lose a huge amount of their 1AR time investment, and you get 6 minutes to expand on 3.5 minutes, which is 9.5 minutes of your answer to the app, right? And they at most are going to get 3 minutes in the 2NR, and maybe they spent 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes in the 1AR defending their app contention. So maybe they get 5 minutes to your 9.5 minutes, right, in the last 2 speeches. But great time trade-off situation for you. Okay. So I think those are the 3 2NR situations. The main thing, of course, right, the big thing is, in general, it's you really extend one of the 2, the turns to the app or the NC, and you shadow extend the other, unless it's good turns, in which case you kick whichever one you're most worried, or you kick the NC, and then you go for the app. So it's a situation where you don't shadow extend the other. I actually have seen debaters do this. They clearly want to go for turns to the position and also shadow extend the NC. That can be very, very dangerous if they got turns, because then Nico will concede the framework debate and the 2AR, make your turns go away, and go for this. A couple of last strategies. So a couple of tweaks. Once you get this basic idea down, there's ways to tweak it and make it a little more interesting and advanced. Oh, we're running out of time. Okay, I'll just get 2 of them. First, nuancing your link for why your NC turns the app value criterion can be really, really valuable. So if you can appeal to just a small part of the NC offense to do that weighing argument, the link to the argument, it can be really nice. Because then you have a situation where opponents who are familiar with the strategy will try to turn the NC, and they'll just have like general offense links back to your value criterion, but they won't answer all the individual sort of arguments in the NC argument for your offense. And then you can be like, okay, my value criterion is wrong, but this one part of my NC contention member link turned your value criterion, but most of your turns don't, because I'm not saying just in general offense links to my value criterion links. There's this particular bit of my offense that link turned your position. And their turn's almost never going to answer that very specific internal link, right, in the NC, and so they will think they've adequately answered your contention, and they have adequately answered your contention under your value criterion, but not under their value criterion, because there's a very particular aspect of that link that's going to have that interaction. Really nice sort of strategic tool that you can take advantage of in this situation. Last thing, when you're going for these turns, it's very, very rare that you ever want to also allow these to weigh under your own value criterion, but there are the reason that in general you don't want to do that is you don't want to give any more options to get back under your value criterion, because if your answer on the app can do that, their occupants may go like back to your value criterion as well, which is a dangerous situation for you. But there are rare situations where that's going to be true. For instance, if you're reading uniqueness counter plan for your libertarianism NC with reparations and want independent layers of offense, back and that sort. But that's rare. Cool, so we are out of time. You all have to get head to modules. I will take 3 minutes of questions though, until 55 since we're all in the same building, if anyone has them.
Can you explain the first thing that you said about how you should have a small internal link under the value criterion?
Yeah, good. So here's an example. Last topic we did the Japan topic. Okay, Japan should amend Article 9. And so one of the NCs I wrote, our topic was this pacifism NC. There was Kant's principle of perpetual peace, and basically arguments that Japan's Article 9 is very close to sort of Kantian cosmopolitanism, which is true. But there's lots of reasons for that, right? So one reason is that Kant condemned standing armies, and Japan would legalize standing armies if they amend Article 9. Another reason was Japan's renunciation of offensive war. These were 2 independent pieces of offense, and the main piece of offense was the renunciation of offensive war as a sort of moral principle and standard. So if I were to be using this NC, I would often be going for just getting rid of standing armies linked to NC. So I had a really nice card that was like standing armies encourage a military-industrial complex, which results in the increase in use of violence because there's political incentives and economic incentives to use armies once they exist, because like companies want there to be conflict and things, since they're currently have like army things purchased. And so I just make an argument for why this link turns their position. This is nice then, because in the world where the 1AR makes a bunch of arguments against Kant's principle, right? Like, actually no, perpetual peace does require the use of deterrence or whatever, right? I go, okay, you're right. Armies are okay under this value criterion, but they're still not okay under your value criterion, because the only piece of offense was standing armies bad, and you have not shown that you get rid of standing armies as your link turns to my NC. You just shown you have independent offense under Kant's, right? Like, you're right. You've shown that deterrence, right, is a way to maintain perpetual peace. Sorry, that doesn't mean you don't have standing armies. So my standing armies link turn is the only piece of offense on the NC flow that interacts under the AC value criterion. General turns of the NC don't, because the only part of the NC that interacted with the AC value criterion was standing armies bad, and you just don't talk about standing armies in your responses or your turns. Yep.
Yeah. Can you explain a bit more how you should repackage the far right debate as sort of a left debate?
Yeah. So. The general thought is find a way to explain how strong principled deontological prohibitions actually invoke, given the current world we live in, given the imperfect conditions we live in, some sort of radical reformation. So in general, principled conservative positions like libertarianism or locking social contract positions, things like this, tend to have pretty strict absolutist principles. But in a world of contemporary injustice, in a world of basically non-ideal situations, it's often pretty easy to argue that non-ideal situations with really strict principles result in very, very radical demands for reform. And so what you want to basically do is take the sort of most principled of the conservative arguments, right? The ones that, the conservative arguments that are really like something which one may never do, right? And use those really strict principles in combination with non-ideal situations in the real world to show how it has some sort of radical reform agenda. as the implication. And that can be a sort of really, really nice way to get the sort of more conservative offense, which is often, most resolutions are liberal position against conservative position with a negative conservative position, because the US tends to be much more conservative than most, other major Western countries. And so that's just how the debate tends to go. So you want some way to package conservative arguments. The more principled you conservative, right? So the more it's just like an economics-y argument, right? Or some sort of consequential argument, the harder it is to do this. But the more radical it's a sort of like principle-based conservative position, the more you can show how those principles in combination with imperfect conditions result. So another good example of this, resolutions about we would often read sort of like imperfect democracy, the government has no right to legislate this issue because they disenfranchise populations. So I remember against various acts that talk about, like a living wage topic about like paying people with disabilities living wages, we had just really nice arguments that like Congress, every time they debate these issues, does not consult with actual disabled people, but instead psychologists who are experts on disability. That's systematic and undemocratic. And there's just a counterpoint that says radically reform the way we develop disability policy, and we have to do that. Like if you do the act right now, it's just procedurally unjust. It's undemocratic in a way that means the government has no right to legislate on this issue right now. And so it's just a sort of democracy NC-ish argument, which then demanded some sort of radical procedural reform before we could do the act reform as even a possibility. Yep.
How would you be able to, so it seems as though the whole strategy, that way you've explained it, works well for like policy, hard right, like Bostrom, util, or even like soft left kind of apps. But what about like, I wouldn't say questionably topical, but like topical-esque chaos? How would you be able to utilize like an NC-AC strategy there?
It's a lot harder, often because it's just not, like, so the way times when the strategy doesn't work, or when you don't have some sort of core topic NC that clearly has a link to that position, right? There's only two types of apps that can become a problem. One of the super specific apps that are clearly not topical because an equal T is true, but no one believes it, right? So sometimes those apps are just like, there isn't some deontological core NC because the whole app was designed to avoid any core negative arguments, right? So those can be tricky. And then sort of critical-ish, not really defending the government policy can be difficult because you often still can't get a link in that situation as well. You can do the same thing, though, in K-debate if they have some sort of critical-ish app and you just got some sort, right? So think about the way that people use CAP-K to criticize identitarian politics, right, in like college policy debate, right? There's a version of that where rather than going CAP-KT, right, you instead just have these type of layers for the interaction between that CAP-K and the AF, right? Where you have these same sort of type of procedural layers that develop all this and then a bunch of link terms to the position, and you can get a similar sort of effect. Often the situation here is basically, you need to have some independent piece, like, the way the strategy has to work is, there needs to be some core argument that's just, right, like, the thing that's a criticism of the AF is not turnable. Sometimes that just can't be a topical NC if the AF is dubiously topical. So sometimes it's going to have to be some other critique you have, or something else. Right? And then just those sort of layers. This is like, when my basic positions often, right, my strategy is just some sort of, you need to be topical arguments, and then just a bajillion layers for that T debate. But it's the same thing, right? The way a lot, right, like, actually, the one place I see decent horizontal layering is sometimes on these T debates where I see lots of arguments why T is good for your method for actually being able to do this, it's good independently for jurisdiction, right? There's lots of layers for why actually be topical. So you get something like that, but I think maybe to take it to a much more extreme level if they thought about it, not just in terms of lots of reasons T is important, but instead, how many different layers for T's importance could I come up with? Alright, you all should go to lab.